Sahana Vavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Sahaviryang Karavavahai, Tejasvina Vadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Part 1, we have undergone a description of Samsara tree. On each branch, a field of experience lies. The birds get attracted to whichever branch those experiences are compatible with. If the bird has a certain idea about the world, then that bird will find itself on a certain branch that represents or symbolizes or reinforces that idea. And since there are so many ideas, as many branches exist. Therefore, samsara is a world of variety. On one branch is one nation. On the other branch is another nation. One nation has a conflict with the other nation, and so the birds start to engage in a quarrelsome conversation, which can lead to violence sometimes. And this is the nature of samsara. It's never been any different other than what you already quite are familiar with. Tell me 1 year when something is not going on. You look at any history book, and you can see year by year, we have gone through times, and those times are a result of these ideas. And these ideas are always in the name of desires. And therefore, every bird has a desire, a notion, a fancy, and the bird cannot help itself but to express this notion or fancy outwards. And therefore, for this reason, we have different branches to support the fancies, the desires of every bird. Part 1 was this description of samsara. And once we get to know samsara and we recognize that samsara is a mixture of ups and downs, you will never find one single year when everything is going smoothly. If you do, you're probably not on Earth. Probably isolated somewhere. So if one's really in touch with the world and the news, we will see on every continent there is something going on. And that's not only in the continent, but also domestically, also on a national level. So domestic, national, international, there are always quarrelsome conversations owing to different ideas and opinions that every bird has for itself and tries to desperately protect so that it may survive just a few more days, a few more years with a certain idea. This is the nature of samsara. Then part 2, we talked about the 4 remedies to samsara. Part 3, going through the 4 remedies of samsara. When I say 4 remedies of samsara, already those 4 should come to your mind, which is why I didn't mention anything. And then part 3, we said that the total reality is appearing as this jiva. When we say jiva, we mean specifically the subtle matter, subtle body. That means the mind. So what is a jiva? Jiva is nothing but a subtle matter which is receiving what's called samskaras, impressions. And those impressions then convert into a desire. And that desire cannot stand undone. It has to be done. And that doing is what compels the jiva outwards through the vehicle of the physical body. And for that reason, the physical body has been created. Why has the physical body been created? For the sake of the jiva, jiva's desires, which is nothing but a collection of samskaras pouring down endlessly in the mind, converting in the form of thoughts and emotions, and then they have the need to come out. And so I say, I want to come to your house, or you want to come to my house. I want to travel. You want to travel. I want to watch entertainment. You want to watch entertainment. All of these decisions are a reflection of the mind. The mind is a reflection of the samskaras. Samskaras are a reflection of the past repetitive actions. Past repetitive actions are a reflection of our free will. Free will is none other than a blessing of Bhagavan. Therefore, all goes back to one's free will. The question is, how does one wish to use that free will on a daily basis? Because by doing so, that sculpts the samskaras, that is the impressions, which further sculpt the mind, which further sculpt your life. And therefore, the life that you have right now is a totality of all of the decisions that you have on a collective basis, on a daily basis, being taken not only in this life, but also in the lifetimes that we do not remember. In other words, for every effect, there is a cause. Effect is our life. The cause is that which we do not quite remember, and yet there always is that effect. And so the effect is what moves the world in the way that the world is moved. All we see in the present moment, in the news and so on, is nothing but the effects of the cause, and the causes are in themselves changing constantly on the basis of this blessing being called free will endowed to every single human being. And so this field of experience that we are experiencing is nothing but that. A freedom of will, an endowment of Ishvara given to every individual, and that free will then gets exercised on a consistent basis, thus producing the world that we now experience nowadays. We also answered, what is the only reason for the universe for existing? In fact, you cannot think of a universe. You cannot think of a universe having a purpose unless there is a Jiva there. For who is there to experience the universe unless there is a Jiva? In other words, where there is a universe, inert matter, insentient objects, there exactly lies a sentient being in which that being can exercise his or her desires. So Jiva causes the universe. Universe causes the Jiva. You cannot say that because of the Jiva, the universe exists, or because the universe exists, the Jiva exists. They exist simultaneously, for they are both beginningless. However, for the sake of understanding a little bit better, we say that the universe has to be there, a field has to be there, a playground has to be there. For whom? The kids. So in a sense, we're all little children. Nothing wrong with that. Krishna has pointed out a few glories. He could keep on listing glories endlessly of this world, this universe, this Jagat. But he pointed out 3 specific glories that are cross-culturally recognized. One of them was the sun. The sun has several uses. You can either receive warmth. That's a good use. Plant some seeds, put some water. The seeds grow and they get nourished by the sun. Therefore, the sun indirectly and directly provides us food, feeds all sentient creatures on earth. The sun also affects our circadian rhythms. What is that responsible for? Behavior, your moods, and your psychological responses are all influenced by the circadian rhythm every 24 hours. Therefore, Bhagavan, in the form of the sun, Chandraha, Aditya, is regulating your behaviors, your moods, your physiological functions, psychological functions, indirectly. We all know that in a 24-hour period, at least from waking up to the time we go to sleep, we go through different moods. That is because of the sun. Usually at 12 o'clock, when the sun is right above us, from our standpoint, from the country that you live in, we're most active, most rajasic. Sun is also responsible for sleep, night, day. Night and day moves the whole world. Can you imagine a life without night and day? Very hard. So Bhagavan, in the form of the sun, gives us night and day. We talked about the moon. The moon too is a powerful reflector of the sunlight. If you were to imagine maybe a couple of generations ago, when we were hunter-gatherers, how do we hunt? We hunted at night. We did hunt at day, certainly, but at night we could hunt baboons. Baboons usually hang out in tribes. And to hunt baboons during daytime is not possible. You need to wait during nighttime. It's much easier. Now, nighttime requires a big, powerful torchlight in the sky. So if you were to be taken back at some point a few generations ago, and you found yourself with a stick in your hand, and you say, what do I do with it? First step, wait for that sun to reflect that light onto the moon at night so that you can see where you're going. In fact, our generations of hunter-gatherers are responsible for us today, the ones who are gone through the industrial revolution, agricultural revolution, and here we are now in the modern revolution. So the moon too was responsible for providing and sustaining human beings in the form of hunter-gatherers at that time. When the sun recedes, the corals, they're actually sentient beings, the corals start to release their egg sperm. In other words, the corals depend when the sun recedes, and therefore the fullness of the moon comes. They start to release egg sperm, and it looks like little snowflakes, except they're going upwards into the sea. Now, these egg sperm, these corals, what do? They produce coral reefs. What do coral reefs do? They have several benefits. First of all is they provide a lot of jobs. Someone takes us to an environment and say, hey, look at the coral reefs. And we go, wow, click, click, left and right. Many jobs are provided by coral reefs. What else do? They protect the coastlines from erosion. Someone has a house on the coastline, goes, hey, look at my big home. They don't realize that the corals have been developing these physical structures called the reefs for millions of years. And because they are there, they are protecting the coastline from excess erosion and from high waves. But we don't think like this, do we? We just buy a house next to the ocean and we say, hey, look at my big house. But we don't know what's going on underneath there, how many effects took place. In this case, what took place is the corals and the coral reefs. And they are a product of, or they are a response to the moon. In other words, the moon indirectly has a change on our ocean ecosystem, on our coastlines, on our tides, on our sleep patterns. Then we talked about fire. Fire too was split into two categories. The external fire in the form of heat. Heat warms us up during winter. Heat is used for melting steel, iron, for sculpting the shape of a car, which you then use to drive. So indirectly, fire, being Bhagavan, is used to help us develop structures, buildings, for buildings. The second type of fire was called Vaishvanara or Samana Prana. Vaishvanara or Samana Prana. In other words, the internal fire, the digestive juices, which are working sometimes over time, depending on what kind of food we eat, or working a little bit, depending on your eating habits. This fire too, in the form of Bhagavan, is acting whenever food is put into our stomach, and we do not know what happens afterwards, but something does happen. We know that much. And what does happen is what? Bhagavan in the form of intelligence, in the form of digestive juice, which digests that food and makes you comfortably sustain your life. Therefore, Bhagavan in the form of the sun, the moon, and the fire is constantly acting in different forces, in different ways, sustaining all beings in this world. The last thing we think about is the moon or the sun or the fire. Yet these are the very essentials, or even air, Bhagavan in the form of air, that are sustaining our life. And if you even noticed that the most essentials are free, the sunlight is free, moonlight is free, fire is free, air is free, and they're the most essentials. And yet those things that cost, are they essential? No. Man-made. I got a watch for you, a Rolex. I got a new phone for you. All of these things that are not essential cost. How ironic indeed. And then in verse 15, Krishna said, who is speaking as awareness, as the final reality, as you can see above me there, the final reality. Krishna speaking as the final reality says, I am in the heart of all beings. What does he mean by this? He means that the awareness is obtaining in and through every single person's, insects, animals, buddhi, the mind. And what is this awareness? It is the awareness because of which you are now conscious of this person that is listening. If your name happens to be Victor, then Victor will be conscious of the person called Victor, which comprises nothing but a mind and the body, and the mind body will be sending out sensations, functions, and those sensations and functions will be known in the presence of this awareness, the final reality. And Krishna says, I am that final reality obtaining in and through everyone's buddhi, in the heart of all beings. He further continues and he says, I am also jnanam. I am that faculty which is able to make this mind right now that's listening to understand certain things, to write down, to say, aha, I got it. So this aha, I got it, this getting it is a faculty of Bhagavan also. And I ask you, how many things have you understood so far in your life? You cannot pinpoint exactly, but you can say certainly many things. In fact, the person that you are today is but a product of the totality of all the things that we have assimilated or understood. And that faculty is because of Bhagavan, the Lord too. The Bhagavan also is the one, the faculty that makes us remember, smrtihi, recollect the information when necessary so that we can practically use it and move forward wisely in our journeys. Jnanam smrtihi. And finally, apohanam. If we need to forgive someone for the pain caused to us at some point, or we need to undo certain unhelpful behaviors or patterns that drive us to do things that are not healthy to us nor the environment, the capacity for that to be destroyed, Shivaratri, that Shiva in a form of destroyer acts and therefore removes those old ways, giving way for something new to take place. And this is called change, transformation. Hence, every time we say, I have transformed in a positive way, I have changed in a positive way, that is because of what? Bhagavan alone. And we can all testify that we are going through constant transformational changes in our understanding only because we have gained through Bhagavan in the form of jnanam, we have remembered Bhagavan in the form of smrtihi, remembrance, and we have also forgotten all things, Bhagavan in the form of apohanam. Therefore, the Lord is our best friend, none other than the one God who has been helping you since the beginningless beginning to be here up to this point, whereas everyone else has come and gone. And therefore, by understanding this, we build a close relationship with that one God who is our best buddy and our savior in and through all of our activities, because he is the knowledge, the remembrance, and the forgetfulness. And furthermore, verse 15, chapter 15, talked about, Krishna said, speaking as the final reality, I am the triad. In other words, I am the topic to be known. I am the knower. In other words, I am the knower. I am the subject, the self, Atman. I am the known objects. In other words, I am also this world, known objects. And I'm also the knowing, or the capacity to know things. And what does this involve? What knows about the world? Your 5 organs of perception. But also this could mean I am the knowledge. Once known, there is nothing else to be known. And this is called Brahmanam. In other words, I am the known, the knower, and the means of knowledge, or the knowing. This is the triad. Which then leads us to part 5. Meaning of Purushottama, verse 16 to 18. Dva vimau purushau loke, ksharascha kshara evacha, kshara sarvani bhutani, kutastho kshara uchyate.
These 2 persons, the perishable and the imperishable, exist in the world. All beings and elements are called the perishable. The changeless is called the imperishable.
Uttama purushastvanyaha, paramatmetyudahritaha, yolo katrayama vishya, vibhartya vyaya ishwaraha.
But the other superior person is called the Paramatman, limitless self, the changeless Lord, who having entered the 3 worlds, sustains them.
Yasmat ksharamati toham, aksharad apichotamaha, atosmi loke vedecha, pratitav purushottamaha.
Because I am beyond the perishable and above the imperishable too, therefore in the world and in the Veda, I am renowned as Purushottama.
Yo mam evamasammudhaha, janati purushottamam, sassarva vidbhajati mam, sarva bhavena bharata.
The one who is not deluded, who knows me in this way, he, becoming the knower of that which is all, gains me as the self of all, Bharata Arjuna.
Iti guhyatamam shastram, idam uktam maya nagha, etad buddhva buddhiman syat, krita krityascha bharata.
Bharata, Arjuna, the sinless one, this most profound teaching has thus been said by me. Knowing this, a person becomes wise, one who has buddhi and who has accomplished all that has to be accomplished.
There are only 2 beings, Purushas, manifest in the universe, the Shara, perishable Purusha, being time-space objects, and the Akshara, imperishable Purusha, being Maya.
For the sake of big picture, I will give us the essence of Krishna's message from verse 16 to 18. So it's much better to get the big picture and then you can fill in the details as we will. But first, let's get the big picture. So Krishna is going to divide total reality into 3 portions, and he's going to use some terminology to do this. Portion 1, portion 2, and portion 3, we will expound. Right now, I'm expounding portion 1. Portion one is the visible universe. The material science deals with this topic, something that they can infer, something that they can perceive, infrared, gamma rays, right? Spectrums of light. Light too is matter. It's a different kind of matter, but it is matter nevertheless. So in other words, the visible universe is the universe that the scientific instruments are good at looking into. They're good at looking not only underground, using different instrumentation. You know, you've even got the stethoscope, you've got the telescope, we've got the microscope, we've got so many scopes for the sake of investigating into this a huge, vast world that has many areas to explore and is made up of forms within forms within forms within forms. Shall we keep going? Within forms. And this is called mithya. So when we say mithya, all we really mean is there's a dependence upon its previous brother or sister. So if we take a clay and then we go into pot, the pot depends on the clay, but the clay depends on the molecules, but the molecules depend on atoms, but the atoms depend on keep on going like that until you can no longer keep on going, owing to the lack of scientific instrumentation. And yet it does not mean that there's nothing afterwards. In Vedanta, we say, no matter how much you keep on going smaller and smaller and smaller, you ultimately come to time and space. And even time and space is a mere concept that depends on a bigger reality than time and space. In fact, who is the one that knows about time? You do. Time doesn't know about you. You know about time. So in other words, even time and space, in which every concept reduces, even that depends on a bigger reality, which we will talk about in portion 3. So portion 1 for now is the visible universe that we can taste, that we can touch, that we can feel, that we can hear, that we can see, and then we can write about, and we can create dramas about, we can have novels about, we can sing about. Portion 1 also is the 5 elements, and the 5 elements is not necessarily included in science, although the Vedanta, the Upanishadic texts, will say that that from which even physical space and time comes from is none other than these 5 elements, these 5 gross elements. And then these 5 gross elements, which I'm not going to say now because it's not relevant, go through a process called the Tanmatras. The Tanmatras is whereby the subtle 5 elements convert into the gross 5 elements. And then before those 5 subtle elements, we had this pure intelligence called Maya. I talked about this in chapter 13, whereby the Sankhya philosophy was expounding the 24 principles of creation. And we have expounded this in that document, which I have clearly shown you. And therefore, there's no reason to go through it again. Portion 1, Krishna calls Akshara Purusha. Akshara Purusha. In fact, it is in the verse. And this Akshara Purusha, the visible universe, the one that we all learn about and study about and talk about, further resolves into Akshara Purusha. Akshara Purusha is portion number 2. And what is this Akshara Purusha? Akshara Purusha is the potential. In other words, this Akshara Purusha, the visible universe, is constantly dissolving every second, every moment into Akshara Purusha, and then it's constantly being thrown out back into Akshara Purusha. And this throwing out in Vedanta we call Vikshepa Shaktihi. Vikshepa Shaktihi. In other words, the projecting power. Another model to define this is if you take the Rajaguna, is the projecting power. The power is able to take the knowledge, the Sattva Guna, and it's able to project it in the form of a name form using the Tama Guna which is the material that makes up this universe. Tamaguna is, in Vedic model, the 5 elements. So if you take the 5 elements, they're there, the material. The 5 elements get projected on this field of awareness, which is portion number 3. They get projected onto this field of awareness. How? Through knowledge alone, through the blueprint, which is none other than the sattva guna, also called the macrocosmic causal body. In other words, the total knowledge of the entire universe, how things are to be, how things are to grow, what is the size, the shape, the decay rate, the age of certain species, the composition of certain elements to create a new star, a new galaxy, the total knowledge of everyone's cause and effect relationship and everything that we have done, all knowledge in the entire universe is in this causal macrocosmic body called Maya. And Rajaguna takes that knowledge and it projects it out, Vikshepa Shakti, in the form of using these 5 elements. And therefore we have this universe that we then study called portion 1, Akshara Purusha. So what is Akshara Purusha? It is nothing but this left side from this chart right here. What are you talking about? Gases, liquids, solids, or any other scientific term, quantum physics, all revolve in this portion number 1, Akshara Purusha. Portion number 2 is Akshara Purusha. Since matter in portion 1 dissolves, the question is, where does it go when it dissolves? It cannot go out of existence because that contradicts law of conservation of matter. And number 2, where will it go? If matter were to disappear, where will it go? If your thought that's also matter, by the way. So portion 1 is not only gross matter, it's also subtle matter. Subtle matter is what? Thoughts, emotions. So there's only 2 kinds of matter, by the way. There's the physical matter, the one that science talks about, the one that science uses their instrumentations to detect. And there is the subtle matter, which is the topic of Vedanta, which is the mind and the thoughts. In fact, it's not only a topic of Vedanta, it's a topic of any kind of motivational talk, how to manage your emotions, how to think right, how to prosper, how to manage your life. All of that is the topic of the mind. And what is the mind? It is also portion number 1, Akshara Purusha, but it is subtle version of Akshara Purusha. So Akshara Purusha has 2 categories, gross, sthula, and sukshma. Going back to portion 2, where the question was, where does Akshara Purusha matter disappear when it is no longer present right now? The answer is Akshara Purusha. In other words, it temporarily resolves where? Back into the macrocosmic causal body, from whence it then gets projected again using Vikshepa Shakti, which is Raja Guna in another model. And therefore, it is a constant disappearance, appearance, disappearance, appearance, disappearance of this world. This world is like a projected frame, one frame after the other, after the other. In fact, we spoke about this last week. Your body, this second, your mind, this second, has no correlation. Nothing about it is exactly the same as it used to be just a second ago, just a millisecond ago. And yet we have a completely continuous experience of our being. And why is this continuous experience there, despite nothing about your body and mind being the same now and now? That is because of portion number 3, which we will talk about, returning back to portion number 2. So this Akshara Purusha, in another way, in another model, we call Maya, the macrocosmic causal body. And this is the very reason why it is deceiving. Why is it deceiving? Because just when we have, or we thought that our thoughts have been resolved, our life has been resolved, and finally we are free and nothing's going on in our life, we are peaceful, guess what? It is only dormant because it is still lying in the macrocosmic causal body. And therefore, it then again gets projected using Vikshepa Shakti and we go, more work to do. And this keeps on going life after life like this, never being able to exhaust this, because the name of this is beginningless. And whatever is beginningless is infinite. Therefore, you can never fix yourself, because you're only fixing a small portion of the infinite. And that's why we say in Vedanta, the only solution is to disidentify from this macrocosmic causal body, from Maya. And this is why Krishna says topic matter of the Vedas is freedom from Sattva Guna, Raja Guna, and Tamaguna. And what is that is free? None other than portion number 3, which we will get to soon. So portion number 2, returning back to, called Akshara Purusha. One final note, is usually, by the way, called in Vedanta Nirguna Brahman. So this Akshara Purusha, in most cases, is referred to Nirguna Brahma. In this very specific context, it is referring specifically to Maya, the unmanifest potential. Now, if we say, what is Ishvara? What is Lord? What is Bhagavan? Bhagavan equals Akshara Purusha, which means the cause. Bhagavan equals Akshara Purusha plus Kshara Purusha. Plus, gotta have one more there, portion number 3. Because both Kshara Purusha and Akshara Purusha, that means the manifest and the unmanifest, they're both inert. Something needs to pervade them to give them sentiency. And that which pervades, we finally go on to portion number 3, is called, in simple, existence awareness. Both portion 1 and 2 are called Kshara, Akshara, Upadhi. What is Upadhi? Superimpositions. In other words, they constantly superimpose themselves onto the substratum. And the substratum is the portion number 3. Just like a movie projector needs the wall for that movie projector, for those projections to actually be known and to be witnessed by the witness who's looking at that movie. So that substratum is, in this case, called Purushottama, the unchanging substratum onto which the Kshara Akshara Upadhi is constantly being projected using Vikshepa Shakti, as I said earlier on. And this final reality, this Purushottama, is the content of every projection. So not only is a substratum of every projection, the Kshara Akshara Upadhi, but it's also the very content of every projection. So now let's bring this back down to earth. If I say to you now, what is the content of your thought?
Consciousness.
Consciousness, the final reality appearing as that thought. So you don't have to now escape your thoughts. You don't have to escape your emotions. You don't have to say, I want something different. The very final reality is appearing as that thought that's saying, I wonder who I am. What is this whole moksha about? Every thought we have, every emotion we have is none other than an appearance of this final reality. And this is where the freedom comes. This is where the seeking stops. One needs not to experience something different, because one is always experiencing Purushottama, the final reality, in the form of a doubt, in the form of clarity, in the form of anything that represents your personal, individualized, customized experience. The content of every samskara, the content of every thought and feeling is the final reality. The content of the whole universe is the final reality. They're called Satchit, existence awareness. And we can prove this because every thought is, in other words, every thought exists. And you can also, is that true? Every thought exists. If it didn't exist, you wouldn't be telling, hey, can I ask you a question? Hey, I've got an issue. Hey, I've got something to resolve. Because just the fact you want to bring it up implies it exists. In other words, the final reality is already there. Existence in a form of that particular thought. But also, you cannot deny the fact that you are aware of the fact that it exists. There is awareness of the fact that that existence in the form of that thought exists, which is why you say, hey, I'm aware of some thought, some existent thought. Now let me bring it up and let me ask you. Therefore, this existence awareness is always appearing in the form of our experience that we are having right now, right now, right now, right now, right now. And this is what freedom really means. I need not chase for anything. I only need to own up that the very content of my existence, of any kind of existence, is none other than the final existence, which Krishna calls Purushottama. In chapter 7, Krishna also called this Paravidya. In chapter 13, he called it Kshetrajna. Kshetra, the field, Jna is the knower. In other words, the field knower, the knower of the field. What field? The field of portion 1 and 2, the manifest and the unmanifest, Kshara and Akshara Purusha. In chapter 14, we call that Brahman. And sometimes it's also referred to as Kutastha, which means in Sanskrit, anvil. And why would you be called an anvil? I say, what is your identity? And you say, who are you? No, what are you? You say, I'm an anvil. Oh, what could this imply?
Anvil is unchanging. It's robust.
Yeah, it's robust. It's unchanging. You can sculpt many metals upon this robust, unchanging anvil. Very solid, unmoving object. Cannot move it. It's like a rock. And because it's so hard, we can endlessly sculpt different thoughts on it. And then we can put them in our minds and we go, oh, I've got a doubt. That thought was sculpted because of this anvil, because of the presence of this anvil. However, in this case, in this verse 16, when he says Kutastha Kshara Uchyate, in this specific case, it's referring to Maya. Now, why is Maya the substratum for Kshara Upadhi, for Akshara Purusha? Because Akshara Purusha has to resolve and stay somewhere. It has to have some platform in which it can resolve. And therefore, in this case, Kutastaha, anvil, is the Maya, the platform in which all of the thoughts resolve into, in which all of the ideas resolve into, in which all of the concepts of the universe resolve into. And this existence awareness, this Purushottama, and what does Purushottama mean, by the way? Purusha, Uttama, the highest Purusha. This Purushottama enters the world, the 14 lokas according to the Vedic model. If you don't want to use the 14 lokas, you can just say enters or becomes the world, appears as the world. It enters the world through its own Kshara, Akshara, Upadhi. And what is Akshara, Kshara, Upadhi? I just said it is the manifest and unmanifest superimposition called Maya that is constantly projected and creates this universe that we are witnessing right now, right now, right now, right now, right now. So through its own power called Kshara, Akshara, Upadhi, it enters this universe. How? In the form of this universe that we're experiencing now. I don't have to tell you the names because it will be listing the names forever, but you can't witness it. Even the wall itself is nothing but material. In other words, this projection needs the substratum on which it can present itself, which then we speak about, which then we engage about, which is why when I spoke about section 1, definition of samsara is nothing but kshara, akshara, upadhi. And this is why we need to bring out portion number 3. Otherwise, we get stuck in a constant tree of manifest and unmanifest, manifest and unmanifest. And what do you get then? You get more manifest and unmanifest. In other words, again, get a manifest body, and then the body demanifests, and then a new body manifests. So the moment we bring out portion number 3, this whole cycle stops. So Purushottama enters the world through its Kshara, Akshara, Upadhi. Just like, for example, the H2O, as though enters every wave in reference to the ocean. Now, it's not like the H2O has entered every wave, but the H2O H2O is present in and through all waves. And what is the ocean? The totality of all names and forms. So when we say Jagat, the universe, what are we talking about? The totality of all names and forms. So just like the H2O has entered every wave, and what does the wave represent? Names and forms, people, objects, universe, 5 elements, wind, fire, space, earth, and so on. Just like that, Purushottama too enters this universe through its own upadhi, its own power, which feels really real, doesn't it? Which feels extremely convincing, doesn't it? This is how powerful this Maya Shakti is. It is so powerful that it feels completely real. It is so real that we literally build our security around it. And yet it is, in essence, completely dependent upon a bigger reality called Purushottama. And that's why we have to bring it out. Otherwise, a person is never going to suspect, never going to say, hey, could there be more here? In fact, the person does get onto the stage, but you still need someone to capture you and complete that inquiry. Otherwise, the inquiry stays halfway complete and we never finish it. So this Purushottama is existence. And this is why whenever you say something, that which you said is. That pen that you're writing with, that pen is. In other words, that pen exists. Glasses is. Hair is. Air is. Thought is. Memory is. This isness is Purushottama. But the name and form that we say is Kshara, Akshara, Upadhi, belongs to Maya. In other words, belongs to these 3 gunas that are constantly projecting out these names and forms. But the fact that they are, the fact that they exist is because of the final reality, Purushottama. And this is the distinction that we call Viveka of Atma, Anatma, Viveka. The self, the unchanging self, the isness, the existence awareness of beingness, existence awareness of my being, and all of those things that appear in that existence awareness in a form of experience. And that experience belongs to Kshara, Akshara, Upadhi, portion 1 and 2. The question then is, why is Brahman, the final reality, called Purusha? Because suppose you're the only person in existence, and all of your little organs are part of you. They're not separate from you. They're not separate from the person. In other words, when Brahman is represented as a Purusha, it's a metaphorical description to represent that this universe, the earth, the lungs, the sun, the heart, the moon, the spleen, right? The universe, the stomach, all of these parts are none other than this one total being, which we call then Purushaha. And not only that, but reason number 2, this being, which includes a combination of material, intelligence, and awareness, this entire being becomes a fully sentient, conscious being. So, is it not true that in your experience, you experience yourself as an intelligent being? Just the fact that you're sitting in a certain way implies there's intelligence there. Just the fact that you eat in a certain way implies there's an intelligence there. How you drink implies intelligence there. There's also awareness of what's being done. That means what the body-mind is doing. But also there is matter. There is physical matter of the hand actually reaching over and drinking some drink, as I can now see Gayatri doing. So in other words, these 3 comprise the total person. And then you extend this onto the macrocosm. And therefore, Uttama Purushaha, the entire universe, is actually one conscious, intelligent, awareful being. Everything is conscious. Everything is alive. We just don't see it because our organs of perception cannot see it closely enough. If we could look deeper and deeper into different objects, we could see everything actually vibrating, intelligently vibrating. This is why the science calls it vibration. The strings are vibrating intelligently. Now let's give you a comparison between the left side and the right side, between Purushottama, that means portion 3, and portion 1 and 2. So I'll just say, for the simplicity reasons, the left side will be consciousness and the right side will be manifest and unmanifest matter. The first is nirgunam. So Purushottama is nirgunam. In other words, it is without any qualities or attributes. Why so? Because that which is Ananda, Satchit Ananda, limitless, needs not any qualities or attributes because it already obtains in and through everything. Therefore, it is attributeless. It is infinite. What does limitless mean? What does infinite mean? It means it is attributeless. Why is it attributeless? Because it is already everything. It already obtains in and through everything. Whereas the right side is, if one is nirgunam, this is saguna. This is with endless modification, with endless qualities, with endless attributes. In other words, colors and shapes and size. In fact, our entire experience is talking to one another as to how's the weather. You know, is it hot? Is it warm? Is it dry? Is it moist? All of these are attributes, saguna. So we're talking about kshara, akshara, upadi qualities called saguna. That means there's lots of attributes there. Going back to the left side, consciousness is chetana. Chetana means it is sentient, it is alive, it is self-conscious, it is conscious of itself, its nature is conscious. Going back to the right side, if one is chetana, this is achetana. In other words, it is inert. The entire universe, including the subtle body, by the way, is inert. This is inert, and this is inert. And you say, how is the subtle body inert? It is inert. It's only because consciousness obtains in the buddhi is it that we have an experience of being sentient, a sentient being. So both sides, this side and this side, this is all called jagat, by the way. Kshara, akshara, upadi, jagat, are insentient, called achetana tattvam. So this is chetana tattvam, achetana tattvam. Sentient, insentient. Conscious, not conscious. Going back to the left side is nirvikara, nirvikara, which means free of modifications. It does not change. It doesn't need to change because, again, it is in and through all things. Only that which changes from A to B implies if I'm A, I'm not B. Therefore, I want to change so I can become B. And then if you're B, you're not A, so you want to go back into A. But nirvikara is already limitless. It needs not to change because it is already everything. Going back to the left side, if one's nirvikara, then this one is savikara. It is constantly undergoing modifications, changes. In fact, what is the truth of the universe that we can all testify through our own experience? Everything is changing in this universe. That is the one definitive truth that is universally agreed upon. And therefore, we're talking about portion 1 and 2, kshara, akshara, upadi. Going back to the left side, consciousness is nirvikalpa, nirvikalpa. It is indivisible. So I'm going to ask you, instead of just writing indivisible, suppose that you're in a room and your mind is paying attention to two people, to the left conversation and right conversation. We all can do this, right? We can pay attention to both experiences. So your mind is split. The focus is split into two, and it's even paying attention. But are you split? Is that being in whose presence this experience of the mind listening to the left side and to the right side, is that being split? No. And that being that is not split is thus the Purushottama, nirvikalpa. Indivisible reality is the final reality. It cannot be divided. Your mind can be divided in terms of its attention, but you, the knower of the mind paying attention to two things, cannot be divided. It always remains one holistic, unified, complete, and whole human being, whole person, whole Purusha. Going back to the other side, the right side, we have nirvikalpa, savikalpa. That means it is divisible. It goes through changes. If I speak, even a thought can be cut into two. I can and not finish my sentences at all. Therefore, everything in the Akshara Upadhi can be divided. We can divide our experience, we can divide a tree, we can divide a bird. I don't know who's going to be dividing a bird in half. We can, even though we're doing cartoons, we can divide everything here. In other words, we can take it because it is different names and forms. What does dividing mean? It means taking one potential out of this infinite potential of knowledge, of blueprint, and manifesting that here in a form of a name and form. Therefore, if it's X, it's not Y. If it's Y, it's not X. Because we take the blueprint of a bird and then we take a blueprint of an elephant. The elephant does not enjoy the status of the bird, and the bird does not enjoy the status of an elephant. Therefore, in reference to the elephant and the bird, they're both divided, but they resolve into none other than Maya. And the truth of Maya resolves into Purushottama. Therefore, the whole thing is ultimately Purushottama. Next is Satyam. So going back to the consciousness, the left side, Satyam. It is an independent reality. It doesn't require anything else to sustain it, to support it. In other words, it lends existence to Akshara Upadhi. Going back to the right side, it is Mithya. It is completely dependent for that substratum onto which Akshara Upadhi can be projected onto and known by this Purushottama, this knower of different experiences. So Mithya means it does not enjoy an independent status. It depends on something else. Ultimately depends on this existence awareness. And then Krishna concludes and he says, this Sat Chit, this Purushottama, is the supreme reality, and that is my nature. That is your real nature. Then verse 17.
Other than the two is the supreme Purusha, Paramatma, pervading the three worlds, waking, dreaming, and sleeping.
Uttama Purusha supports or lends existence to the waking, the dream, and deep sleep. In other words, suppose now someone's having an experience in the waking state. In fact, we're always having an experience in the waking state for most of the time. Whatever experience that is going on is only because of this existence that is appearing in the form of this waking state. So just take the one single state of waking. That waking is made from Purushottama. The content of everything is called Purushottama. The content of the dream is Purushottama. The content of the deep sleep is Purushottama. The whole thing is Purushottama. Just like, for example, the ornaments belong to none other than the gold. The gold is the content of all ornaments. The wood is the content of all furniture. Therefore, the consciousness, the Uttama Purusha, is the content of all three states. It lends its existence to the waking state, to the dream state, and to the deep sleep state. Verse 18.
Transcending the perishable Purusha and the imperishable Purusha. For that reason, I am known in the Vedas and the world as Purushottama, the highest Purusha.
Why is the highest Purusha, Brahman, Satchit, why is he called the Uttama, the supreme Purusha? Because the final reality is not sullied by Akshara Upadhi. That means there's no conflict that can actually sully the awareness of being, the existence itself. If something could sully existence, then the entire universe would at once become sullied with that contaminant. If anger sullied the final reality, every being, including dogs and cats, would suddenly be angry because the final reality obtains as every name and form. But we don't experience this. Every name and form enjoys its unique identity according to its cause-effect relationship. And despite that, it is still alertly aware of itself. Talking about human beings now. Therefore, no matter what the human being goes through, it never sullies this awareness that is witnessing all of the sullied mind and unsullied mind that's going through its life. Sometimes the mind sullied, sometimes the mind gets unsullied. And this witness remains completely independent of all of that. This is why we say Satyam On the left side was the independent reality. It never gets affected by this maya, this knowledge or this ignorance at all, which is why you can say, I am ignorant. In other words, there is knowledge about the fact that this mind is ignorant. Or you say, I know, I got it. There is knowledge of the fact that the mind has got it. Therefore, the final reality remained completely intact no matter what the mind is going through. And finally, it is not touched by the three gunas, as I said. That means the vikshepa shakti, the projecting power, does not put something onto final awareness, and then the awareness says, okay, I am permanently aware of being happy. Again, this is not our experience. Otherwise, every being would be constantly 24/7 happy. Even in deep sleep, you would be happy, or dream you would be happy. So therefore, this reality is neither happy nor is it sad. It is just the witness of all states of mind which belong to Kshara and Akshara Upadhi. We have a classic example in Vedanta whereby the common traveler is walking and they don't have quite the full faculty of light. The light is not there. And there lies on the ground from the kids that have been playing the day before. They were just maybe climbing some trees, and then the rope dropped down onto the ground, onto the track. And then next day you're walking onto that track, you just want to take some little break from hustle and bustle, and you see a little brownie thing there. And then the first thing that we make a conclusion, we say, it's a snake. And not only that, but the snake generally exudes an emotional response in us. It exudes a perception that is completely in line with our projection of what that may be. And therefore, this snake, then we try to poison, then we try to kill the snake, we try to feed the snake. But have we poisoned the rope? No, we've only fed and poisoned our own idea, our own projection that belongs to none other than the ignorant mind. It does not belong to the rope at all. In fact, there is no connection between the rope and the snake whatsoever, because the snake is entirely an error made by the perceiver. And where does the perceiving happen from? From the buddhi. Therefore, the buddhi is uneducated. Therefore, it innocently uneducated about what? About what a rope really looks like. So if I don't know what the rope really looks like, if I don't really pay attention, I will fill in an approximate. And that approximate, in this case, is a snake. And this is how projection in this world works. I see something, the objective reality, and then the mind innocently fills in an approximate. That's called vikshepa shakti. And then it sees its own idea over what is actually something totally different. I see a snake, I see a bad person upon someone that is completely normal. We do this all the time. In every facet of our life, we make assumptions, we project our own notions, and then we act in line with our notions and not in line with what is actually presented to us, which is the rope. The value neutral reality called in Sanskrit vyavaharika, the empirical transactional reality. No. I then project, and therefore one has to get re-educated to stop projecting their false ideas onto the world. So what do I want to really say? The rope, irrespective, never got sullied by the infinite billions of jivas in this universe saying this about God, saying that about God. He's up there, he's evil, he's this, she's that. All of these are mere opinions. They do not touch the final reality, which cannot be sullied, which cannot be contaminated by any opinion that we give it. In other words, the truth doesn't need to be defined. The truth is independent of itself. It stays firm of itself because it is the only truth in the universe. Anything that opposes it has a need to make an opinion. And why do we make an opinion? Because we don't have the right knowledge. Therefore, step one, get educated, and therefore this projection stops. And so, in the light of one who knows this knowledge, no longer do I see the world as a snake, I see the world as a rope. And then you go one step further and you say, what's the truth of that rope? Because the rope is nothing but the vyavaharika world, the Akshara Upadhi, that's the rope. But then what's the truth of this rope? Purushottama, the final reality. So if you go one step further, So what's the first step in Vedanta? Stop projecting your personal notions. Step one. Otherwise, I cannot even see God. I cannot even experience God in the form of what is, in the form of objective reality. Step one, stop projecting. How? Through getting educated, which is what we're doing. Only then when I see the actual reality, what is right in front of me, then I inquire and say, what is the truth of this reality that is beholding me, this reality that is being experienced? The truth of it is Brahman, the final reality. So it's a two-step process that one has to go to in order to get to the final reality. And this is why we keep on saying mind qualifications are so important. Otherwise, the one who's still living in a bubble called pratibhasika bubble, they're simply going to keep on projecting even onto the scriptures, which are trying to tell you, hey, firstly, acknowledge the world, the Vyavaharika world, appreciate the God's world in a form of names and colors and shapes and sizes, and then inquire from that standpoint, what's the truth of this, the final reality, existence, awareness in the form of this world that is called Vyavaharika. Krishna says to Arjuna, I am the Purushottama. Krishna is not referring to his stula sukshma sharira, to his subtle and gross body. What is Krishna referring to? He's referring to the final reality, existence, awareness. So part 6 is benefit of direct knowledge of self as Brahman. So what's the benefit having ascertained this knowledge firmly? What will it do for me? Most chapters will actually incorporate this kind of like, what will I get out of this? Because the person wants to know. So we always sell you the idea of what is the benefit.
The one who knows me, the Purushottama, one self in all, is the knower of all, because only one reality is appearing as names and forms. That one worships me, awareness, wholeheartedly. Again,
Krishna will divide, for the sake of clarity, a person into two categories, the discerning ones and a non-discerning ones. And let's start with discerning devotees. In this case, this devotee is called an Advaita Bhakti devotee. The mind of that Bhakta has ascertained the final reality. That means they are what's called a jnani, the firm person in knowledge. And what is their experience like? First of all, they have an objective relationship with matter, with the world, as I just said earlier on. Objective relationship with the matter. Their minds remain in a state of inquiry instead of making a conclusion. What is a mind of a non-inquirist person like? It has a need to make opinions about the world. They see a conflict somewhere, immediately make what kind of a leader is that? Or what kind of a person is that? Rather than doing that, remain an objective person who is simply curious. Hey, I wonder what is the product. I wonder what kind of things took place for this to come to be in the way that it's now, right? I wonder what progress has gone through for this to be what it is right now. So rather remain an inquirer than a person who makes a firm statement with a full stop. So in other words, they have a objective reality relationship with reality. An objective relationship, it means they remain a questioner, an inquirer, one who is curious about reality rather than putting a full stop wherever they go. Full stop, you're like this, full stop. I'm like this, full stop. I can't do it, full stop. I can't do it, full stop. No, remove this full stop. There's no more full stops. It is a dash or a dot, dot, dot. You know, after dot, 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 the story continues. Okay, so you're a dot, dot, dot from now on. You, the objective person, the body, mind. They also recognize that whatever is known, whatever experience is known to be so, belongs to portion 1 and 2, Kshara, Akshara, Upadhi. And this is just the nature of the world. You don't need to negate it. You can't negate it because it is Ishwara's order of reality. In fact, if you could negate it, you also negate your own body and mind. So there's nothing wrong with the world as such, because it needs to be there for the jivas to exhaust their desires, for other jivas, right? They also need to discover the truth. So we need to leave the world alone. Let the field be a healer for all beings. Let the world be a healer for all beings. They also enjoy the status of what's called a Sarvadit. Sarvadit, that means omniscience. In other words, this person whether it's a he or she, gender is irrelevant, is a knower of all, an omniscient being. Now we have to be careful here, because this is where the big mistake comes. The scriptures will further divide this word omniscience, this knower of all, into two categories. The first one is Sarvadit. This means Sarvadit, knower of everything in reference to details like size, age, shape, color. I will know exactly what you're thinking now, when you were born, when you're going to die, who's your parents, what their names are. I will know exactly how to fly an airplane without even having any training. I will know they could recite the entire periodic table of elements without getting any school training, could calculate any maths equation, no matter how hard it is, faster than a calculator. Know everything about the world in absolute detail. This is the first one, Sarvadit. The second one, when it says knower of all, is Sarvajna. So Sarvadit is knower of details. Sarvajna is knower of general knowledge, knower of general knowledge. What does this mean? In other words, I know that if I look at pottenware, the truth of all pottenware, no matter what colors or shape or size or form they are, is none other than the clay. Now, which one do you think that the Bhakta is here, the one who has ascertained this knowledge? Sarvavit or Sarvanya?
Sarvanya.
Sarvanya, I'm glad you said that, because what happens often in spirituality is the person, maybe they're responsible, maybe irresponsible, they will say, I am a knower of all. What's the first thing the mind is going to do? It's going to say, wow, they are a Sarvavit. They know all details. No, the only being that's Sarvavit is Ishwaraha. In fact, Mundaka Upanishad will say that Ishwaraha is Sarvavit Sarvajna. In other words, there is a completely appropriate name. Ishwara not only knows the details of everyone, everything, the one that runs the universe has to know about the details of the universe which is being run, but also knows its own truth. It is also a Sarvajna. So Ishwara is not ignorant. Maya is not ignorant. Maya, Ishwara know very much. My truth is Purushottama. It's only the Jiva that doesn't know that, and that is why the Jiva has to be educated through this methodology. Therefore, now in this verse, when it says the word Sarvavit, again, you have to apply context. It is not referring to knower of everything in detail. It is referring to knower of everything in general. In other words, whatever name and form I look at is Akshara Upadi, which further resolves into Purushottama. In other words, I don't need to know the facts about periodic table of elements and the stratosphere and all form like the decomposition rate, the decay rate, how many molecules inside every single particular component, right? I don't need to know any of that. I just need to know one thing. The truth of everything is this one reality, Purushottama. And this is therefore the knower of all. Because why? If you know the content of everything, then you are a knower of all things, in which that content inheres. And that content inheres in where? In everything, in the person, in the insects, the plants, the universe, in the air, in the space, in everything. Therefore, the Advaita Bhaktaha is a Sarvadit, a knower of everything in general. If your car breaks down, don't ask them how to fix the car unless they're a mechanic, because they're not going to know how to fix the car. They don't know how to fly a plane. They're just like an ordinary person, but they do know that everything that is being witnessed is Akshara Upadi, resolves into Purushottama. Furthermore, the Advaita Bhaktaha wholeheartedly worships Ishwaraha. And what is Ishwaraha? None other than God. And what is God? Awareness. So when we say God, we're talking none other than existence awareness. Why does this one worship God, existence awareness, wholeheartedly? Before moving that forward, what does wholeheartedly mean? Suppose someone doesn't love you okay. Can you be loved wholeheartedly by a limited human being? You don't love me enough. I don't experience wholehearted attention from you. I want more attention from you. Can a limited being ever deliver infinite attention. That's called wholeheartedly. No. In other words, to expect a limited being to love you unconditionally, that is impossible, because that human being is going through their own stuff. Samskaras are pouring through that human being's mind as much as they are pouring through your mind. The question of wholehearted love here is non-existent. It belongs to fairy tales. It's a good idea. It sounds nice, but realistically, it is just not possible. So Advaita Bhaktaha worships me wholeheartedly. Wait a minute, didn't I just say that wholeheartedly is not possible? But Advaita Bhaktaha worships self wholeheartedly. How is that possible?
They are worshipping themselves.
Exactly. In other words, their understanding is, I'm never away from Purushottama. And once you understood something, you don't need to remember it, because it is a permanent understanding. And because that is so, they wholeheartedly worship self now, not because they remember, but because they know that everything is this final reality self. So that was all discerning. Now let's go into non-discerning individuals. They worship the world for the sake of either kama, artha, or dharma. Nothing wrong with this, by the way. Suppose your life was monotonous. Everything is the same. Food is the same. Conversations are the same. Everything is the same. Would that be fun? No. So we all need kama in our lives, some pleasure, some delights in our life. Suppose you didn't have any security, no job, didn't know how you're going to pay for anything, your children or yourself. Would that be fun? No. So we all need artha. We all need security and wealth. And suppose that we had no ground to decide what is right or wrong. Would that be fun? No, we would hurt ourselves. We would not survive even one day. In other words, dharma. So these ordinary human beings, as sincere as they are, will look for how to increase my kama, increase my artha, or increase my dharma. And why do they worship this? Either for drishta or adrishta palam, immediate results or results in the future. Okay, verse 20.
The most profound knowledge, science of consciousness, has been imparted. Knowing it, one becomes wise and fulfilled.
Okay. Idam guhyatamam shastram. So guhya is secret. So this is the most secret teaching. What do schools teach us? They teach us akshara vidya. They teach us what the Mundaka Upanishad will call apara vidya, inferior knowledge. Not that it's inferior, but it just means that it's knowledge that's changing. It can be forgotten. It is subject to errors, and it's subject to improvement. So in other words, the knowledge that we get taught in this world is always of the nature of akshara upadi, akshara knowledge, science, geography, history, and so on. Nothing wrong with that knowledge, but this knowledge is other than that. So even though this knowledge is out in the open, it is still a secret. You can look up on archive.org. Every Upanishad is there. All of the Vedas are there. It's all out there in the open. But if the mind is not mature, it will look at this as an irrelevant mumbo jumbo. Like, what is this consciousness stuff? Give me more artha, kama, and dharma, right? So one has to be a certain mind, state of mind, to be attracted to this final knowledge. So even though it's out in the open, it is still guhya. It is still a secret. Therefore, it's an open secret. Unless the jiva has these 4 graces. And what are the 4 graces, if you remember? You need self-effort. Okay. Even if you're given the guru and the methodology, you still need to apply that through your own self-effort. But even if you have those 3, the guru, the methodology, and self-effort, it doesn't mean that the knowledge will take place. And that's why you need Ishwara's grace, Ishwara Anugraha. And the question is, how do we gain Ishwara Anugraha? The answer is by complying with Ishwara's laws and orders, and that's called dharma. Which is why I keep on saying one has to live an honest, mature life, because that honesty is as though keeping Ishwara happy and says, okay, you have proven yourself. You have shown yourself that you are an honest human being who contributes and who cares about my creation. For that reason, I'm going to have you understand this knowledge. And then all four come together in a person that's called moksha. And then Krishna says, the one who assimilates this knowledge called Brahma Vidya, Para Vidya, the highest knowledge. So inferior knowledge is called Apara Vidya. Superior knowledge is called Para Vidya. The one who ascertains this Para Vidya or Brahma Vidya or Purushottama Vidya, what is the benefit? Permanent freedom from sense of becoming, permanent freedom from a sense of being bound by certain things. Just like if I put a big bag on you with bricks, how does that feel? And you try to walk forward, how does that feel? Uncomfortable. So what is moksha? Unbuckling that big bag of duties that I think that I have to carry along and I have to kind of, have to move forward with, just totally drops down. In other words, total freedom from a sense of that heaviness, that feeling of heaviness, that feeling of limitation. And also the freedom from that complaining person, the one that always has the need to complain and to make things right and to make the bed in just the right warmth and, have someone talk to you in the right way. All of these complaints fall away because they belong to the person. They don't belong to self, the Atman. Therefore, the complaints reduce. And they also reduce through the course of time. It's not like they suddenly fall away because you have nididhyasanam, right? And then what happens upon death for this person called a jnani who has ascertained this knowledge? We have to ask the question, what happens to this person, the physical body, as Mina has asked? What happens to a jiva? Okay, what is a jiva? Nothing but a collection of samskaras. Now, where do those samskaras go? They just go back into Akshara Purusha. They just dissolve. Okay, they don't go anywhere. We don't say it's destroyed. There's nowhere to be destroyed, nothing to be destroyed. They just dissolve. There's no ownership of them anymore. What happens to that one who is released? One enjoys oneself as limitlessness itself. That means nothing is missing whatsoever. The whole universe, the whole existence is me alone, pervading in and through all things. Nothing is missing whatsoever. Infinite knowledge, infinite freedom, infinite delight, infinite joy, infinite cheerfulness, infinite everything. If it wasn't infinite, who would pursue this? And not only is it infinite, it is eternal. In other words, one is no longer bound to Maya's upadhi, of body and mind. One has released that completely and is now this existence awareness, which is free of all conditionings. And finally, this Brahma Vidya, why can it not be discovered by oneself? The reason is because the Jiva wants freedom. But the Jiva will never find the freedom by oneself. Why? Because the Jiva is looking for the sought, and yet the Jiva is the very sought right now. So someone has to point that out, that what you're seeking, you're not different from. And only then the person goes, how is that so? And then we reveal to you that the truth of Akshara Upadhi is none other than Purushottama. In other words, the final reality, existence awareness, is appearing as this person right now, as that person who is now listening. And there is nothing you need to do about that because that is a fact that is true right now. Etad buddhva buddhiman syat. The highest use of one's intellect is to realize that the one's truth, which is beyond the intellect. Again, another irony. Why do I use my intellect? To realize that the truth of myself is beyond this very intellect. It is the witness of the intellect. And this ends chapter 15, which started out by pointing out descriptions of samsara, means to cut the samsara tree, and the culmination of all of the jiva's travels that the jiva has gone through, those 4 sadhanas. The culmination of that is this permanent freedom from one's sense of limitation. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.